is probably by an hour, give or take, broad range of topics. You and I talked a little bit, so we've got a clue where some of this will go. Every now and then, Joe will come in out of deep left field.
I don't know if I have any questions.
Every now and then you do. Talk a little bit. Right now you're the managing partner of Troutman Sanders, correct?
Yeah, I'm the managing partner of Troutman Sanders in that office.
Troutman Sanders has offices where?
Various places around the country, and in D.C., Washington, D.C., New York, Richmond, Raleigh, Chicago, out on the West Coast, Portland, San Diego, and some other places.
What's your role with the firm?
Well, I joined the firm in 2002, January of 2002. I had been practicing law in Columbus, and they recruited me to bring my government relations and lobbying practice to Troutman. And I did, and we set it up a little different. We set it up, I joined as a partner in the law firm, but also we set up a subsidiary of Troutman Sanders to do the lobbying work and the government relations consulting work, with the idea that a lot of the work performed in that area is not necessarily done by lawyers. A lot of the best talent in that area may not be members of the bar. I happen to be.
Sometimes the word lobby, sometimes lobbying gets a bad name. I mean,
right.
When somebody asks you to define lobbying or define what a lobbyist does, what's your definition?
It's advocacy. It's advocacy of on issue advocacy, and working with policymakers to make sure that the people who you are advocating for are heard.
Sometimes getting what a client needs or is trying to accomplish is not easy working through a governmental process, right?
Of course. Of course it's not always easy. One of the first lawyers I ever worked for had one of the best lines I've ever heard. I was in my second day as a summer associate, summer law clerk, we used to call them. And one of the senior partners came in my office and was asking, we were chatting and just talking and being friendly. And he asked what I was working on. And I said, well, I'm working on a project you sent. And he said, well, how's it going? And I said, well, it's hard. And I'm having a difficult time. And he said, of course you are. If it was easy, I would have done it myself. And you know, and he said it kind of in a friendly way, but I've remembered that if it was easy, anybody could do it. I mean, that's just the way life is.
Great piece of advice when you first started in the General Assembly from a veteran legislator.
I've gotten a lot of good advice. I've gotten a lot of good advice from a lot of people with a lot more experience than I've had in various phases of my life. I mean, when I got to the legislature, I was the beneficiary of some really good counseling, some good models, some good mentoring. But that was my first exposure to this law firm. But Zell was my teacher, and I remember his guest lecturer was Pierre Howard, who was in the state senate, and the two of them were the ones that sat me down one day and said, you ought to go into politics. We like you. We like what you're saying. We like what you're thinking. Well, in 1990, Zell became governor and Pierre became lieutenant governor. And so in November of that year, right after the election, Emily and I were on our honeymoon, and we were out of the country on our honeymoon. That was before cell phones, or before cell phones had made it to Columbus. And I got back to the office, and there were these frantic messages to call Zell Miller. And I called, and they said, please come up and meet, and I did. And I got in the car and drove to Atlanta. And he asked me to be one of his floor leaders in the Senate. So it was unusual because there was no precedent that someone who'd never even served in the Senate was already an officer. And so I was able to be the sponsor of the Hope Scholarship. So other major legislation, but I was able to be one of the primary sponsors of the Hope Scholarship legislation and the lottery. And that was an opportunity to do something that that a freshman senator would not have otherwise been able to do.
The Hope Scholarship changed Georgia.
Oh, it's probably had as dramatic effect on higher education as any policy hitherto. Maybe the only other major change would have been desegregation, changing the face of higher education. And that would probably be a fair analysis. Hope Scholarship has changed many ways. It's changed the quality and the quantity of the student base in the entire university system.
Go back, another school I was going to ask you about is Columbus State, which you grew up, what, less than a mile from the Columbus College campus?
I did, less than that.
And went to Hardaway.
I grew up right by the campus.
When you were a co-sponsor of Hope, did you foresee the changes Hope would drive to something like Columbus College?
I had no clue.
What do you think now?
I think it has had a dramatic impact on the Columbus States of the world. Columbus State is now what was a primarily community-based higher education product, and greater community-based, not just Columbus, is now a destination place for certain types of students. And certain music, arts, performing arts. And
business,
and you hear you can be in a discussion in the Metro Atlanta area, and people will be talking about their child at Columbus State.
That wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, would not. That was not. I didn't envision that. Someone may have, but I didn't see. I wasn't smart enough to see that big change on the horizon. And particularly it and its progeny, and as it's developed. I mean, the starting point was just the starting point. In 1993 and 94, in those early years, it was a framework in place. It's evolved into something so significant that it's changed the state.
Question, I'm coming out of left field. When you're driving back to Columbus, I don't know how you split your time between Atlanta and Columbus, but what are you thinking about, or what do you miss, or what's something that you desire about going back to the Columbus area?
I feel comfortable in Columbus. Columbus is a comfort zone. Atlanta is where I have to be on my game. In Columbus, I'm home. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much so.